So I want to start off by saying my name is Thandiwe Abdullah. I'm 15. I'm actually from Los Angeles, where we have we have in Los Angeles now over 525 unprosecuted murders at the hands of law enforcement. And so as Attorney General of California, you worked closely with tens of thousands of law enforcement officers. Communities of color, specifically Black communities, across California and the United States are often targeted, criminalized, brutalized, and murdered by armed law enforcement officers. How do you plan to address this issue in relation to gun control? Because, you know, police violence is gun violence.
That's right. Thank you. And thank you for your
what
leadership.
specific policies would you implement in an effort to demilitarize police and make our communities safer?
That's right.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. And I'm going to start with your last point, because it's a really critical point that you've made, which is the demilitarization component. We have a military to prepare us for war. The failure of criminal justice policy in America was to declare war on the people of our country, to do it with the war on drugs, to declare war on whole communities of people who required support, who required that we would acknowledge the neglect, intentional, and then address it. So let's start there with acknowledging history, which is that there were leaders in the United States government that declared war on the American people. And so there is no question that we need to demilitarize police departments, but I'll talk to you more specifically about my whole plan for reforming the criminal justice system. And as you have said, I know the system from the inside out. I made a very conscious decision to become a prosecutor. Growing up as a Black girl in America, nobody had to teach me what was not right about the system. And my point was, why do we always want to change the system from the outside? Let's also be on the inside. So I made a decision, and it was there that I was able to lead, as one of the few in the nation at that time, initiatives that were about getting jobs to people who were arrested for drugs. It was about saying that the police of California, which was one of the first, I was one of the first in the state, in the country to do this, will be required to be trained on racial bias and in procedural justice. I was the first, I believe, in the country to require a state law enforcement agency to wear body cameras and keep them on full time. So there is that, but part of my plan for going forward includes, because that's about what I've done, about what we need to do around, one, ending mass incarceration, and that's about everything from sentencing reform to what we need to do around exonerations. We have got to not only decriminalize but legalize marijuana. So there is that piece, which I will lead, but there is also the piece that is about what there needs to be in terms of accountability for law enforcement. And when I say that, I mean both police and prosecutors, because I'm really clear about what goes on inside the system. And there needs to be accountability by everyone. You know, it's an interesting thing in the criminal justice system. When we talk about accountability, the word, if you look it up, if you looked at a word cloud, always comes up around somebody who's arrested, but rarely comes up around the system that led to that arrest. And so there needs to be accountability. Another piece of my plan, which is also part of your point, is what we need to do around understanding that there's a criminal justice system that has been influenced by for-profit industry. And that relates to everything from the money bail system of America, which I've been a champion in the United States Senate on saying must end, because you've got people sitting in jail every day in America waiting for trial simply because they didn't have enough money to afford to pay bail. Meanwhile, people who had the money are out walking around. Second, I'm saying we need to shut down those for-profit prisons, and I will do that on day one in terms of any federal tax dollars, because imagine what we're talking about. The business model is that people are making money off of the incarceration of other people. And so it's about shutting down and taking the money and the profit out of the criminal justice system. And then the last piece has to do with what we need to do to have a system that recognizes that the way it has been playing out. We can talk about what is happening under this administration around the inhumanity and the crime that is being committed by the Trump administration around separating children from their parents at the border. But let's also recognize, guys, that there is also a big part of what's been happening in America's criminal justice system that has been about separating families. And so part of correcting it has to be conscious of what needs to happen around having a criminal justice system that values families and is aware of and takes the least harmful measures that will end up separating families that are otherwise loving families that deserve to thrive.
Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Kamala Harris.
Thank you all.
Thank you.